Well, on our second lead story today, we are looking at Nigeria, where it has not been clear how long some 876 children had been held by the Nigerian army at several camps that were set up after driving out Boko Haram militants in Maiduguri. Now, the Nigerian army routinely detains civilians found in areas that have been previously ruled by the insurgents on suspicion that they too might be linked to militant activities. Now, after UNICEF secured their release a few days ago, it has been declared there is no proper legal documentation for them being held at the camp.
UNICEF and other organizations accuse the army of no charges against the detainees and the fact that children are often sent to rehabilitation centers that they call jails. According to Mr. Fontaine, and I quote, "We fear that there are children detained simply because they were held by Boko Haram. If the Nigerian army has made no comment, officials have called on the need to interrogate civilians to determine if they are related to the extremist group operational for 7 years, striving to establish an Islamic state."
We're being joined by Dune Porter. She's the chief spokesperson of UNICEF in Nigeria. Good morning, Dune, and welcome to the morning call. Just a brief introduction. How long have these children been held, and on what grounds were they being held by the Nigerian army?
These children were held by the Nigerian army for 2 reasons. One is that they've been held for screening after they were found in areas that were under the control of Boko Haram. Some very, very young are being held because their parents are being screened. Over the past year, in fact, since last December, 876 children who've been released from military detention in northeast Nigeria. The most recent release, which took place last month, was of about 560 women and children. Of those, there were 430 children in that group. And they were released in the military barracks at Giwa in Maiduguri, which is in Borno State.
Now, June, where were these children being held at the camp? Were they in some sort of holding cells, or were they just in the camps like the way the soldiers are normally in tents and the setups that they have? And weren't the Nigerian army breaking any human rights laws within the Nigerian constitution when they did this?
I actually don't know the details of the cells, the camps. I know that some of the children have been kept together in quite large rooms. I've read reports that some of the conditions were quite crowded. We urge that the army really holds these children for screening for as short a time as possible. And we are advocating very strongly on that. We're advocating very strongly that the children be considered as victims. And because they are, first and foremost, they are victims. Boko Haram has very cynically used children, more than 80 children in the past, as suicide bombers. These children, absolutely, they are victims. They are not perpetrators. They're too young to be considered perpetrators of violence.
Now, just to follow up on that, Dune, where are the children currently? We don't have a clear information on where they are, and if you know their whereabouts, have they either been reunited by their parents, or are they under the custody of the UNICEF?
Some of them are united with their families. It's a large number of children, so obviously the story is different for each individual. Sadly, very, very sadly, and this is partly because of the use by Boko Haram of children, especially in these horrible so-called suicide bombings, families and communities are very often fearful and suspicious about the children when they return. That is another huge project that UNICEF, and we're working with partners on this, has to undertake, and we have started this work both to give psychological support to the children themselves, but also working with the communities.
And, thank you very much, Dune Porter, for joining us on the morning call. That was